You've become a bottleneck, Ava. We need agility, not legacy. The words floated past me, past the rows of hospital monitors I'd personally calibrated, and landed like a slap. My name is Ava Langford, 54 years old. Until 7 minutes ago, I was the lead systems architect at Briar Hill General Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina. 17 years. 17 years of sleepless nights, double shifts, and software patches made on Thanksgiving mornings, erased in a 9-minute meeting led by Colton Myers, the new Chief Operations Officer. MBA from Stanford. No background in medicine. 4 months into the job, and he was already restructuring everything. Behind him, a consultant named Trey stood by the window, tapping notes into a tablet, probably drafting the press release. "We've prepared your exit package," Colton added, sliding a thick envelope across the desk. 2-month severance. Standard NDAI nodded. My ID badge felt heavier than usual against my chest. 17 years, and not once had a system gone dark under my watch. Not during the 2017 cyber breach, not during the winter flood blackout, not when budget cuts halved my staff. "The security team will help you collect your things," he said. I placed my badge on the table, along with the access token I'd guarded like my own heartbeat. "The master credentials are in the encrypted archive, labeled and logged." Colton smiled. "Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable, Ava. Change is uncomfortable but necessary." I looked at Trey. He hadn't asked me a single question during his so-called audit. But he'd be sitting in my chair by Monday. I should have warned them about the legacy lab system, about the customized imaging protocol, about the firewall rules only I knew. But instead, I stood and walked out. If this story resonates with you, or if you know someone whose quiet dedication deserves recognition, consider subscribing, liking, or sharing. Some stories deserve to be seen. I followed the security officer down the East Wing hallway, past the oncology station where I once fixed a terminal mid-surgery prep, past the sleep clinic whose software I rewrote line by line when their vendor abandoned them. No one met my eyes. A few nurses nodded, unsure of what they'd heard. In the IT room, I packed in silence. A box of photos, a mug from my late husband, a crumpled thank you card from a third-year resident I'd helped recover lost records for. Each item felt heavier than it should have. The screens around me still glowed with dashboards I'd custom-built, alerts color-coded to urgency, error detection scripts I'd written at 2 a.m. I paused by the main terminal and logged out for the last time, fingers hesitating over the keys, not out of sentiment, but duty. I had done what needed to be done until they told me not to. Walking out felt unreal, like I had left something unfinished, a server reboot pending, an alert unacknowledged. I slid behind the wheel of my truck, placed the cardboard box beside me, and stared at the hospital's glass facade for a long moment. They didn't just discard my title. They discarded context. Every bridge I'd built between clashing systems, every workaround crafted in the dead of night when a vendor failed to deliver. None of that was in the severance folder. They didn't want my knowledge. They wanted my absence. And it would take exactly 6 days for that decision to start unraveling. I started at Briar Hill just after my 37th birthday. Back then, I was freelancing in private tech, financial systems mostly. But after the market crashed and Jonas was diagnosed, I needed something stable. His treatments weren't covered under our old insurance. Briar Hill wasn't the plan. It was survival. I knew nothing about medical software. But I learned. Fast. Dr. Ellman, the old director, understood what mattered. He didn't care about buzzwords or dashboards that looked sleek in board meetings. Ava, he said once, no one ever died because a screen wasn't pretty. But someone might if the wrong field pulls the wrong data. So I built around reliability, manual overrides, redundant backups, fail-safe connections, not elegant, but unbreakable. I skipped Christmas the year the prescribing platform needed emergency upgrades. I missed Megan's senior recital to stay overnight and fix a botched security update. Jonas always understood. "You're buying people time," he'd say, gripping my hand through IV lines, just like they're buying it for me. He passed 8 years ago, and after that, Briar Hill wasn't just work. It became home. Nurse Camille from pediatrics, who always brought me ginger tea during patch nights. Dr. Iyer in radiology, who left sticky notes on my monitor just to say thank you. Even Marvin, the janitor, who'd sweep around me in the server room without saying a word, just so I wouldn't feel alone. I was never trying to be seen. I just wanted to keep it all running. But systems that run too smoothly? People forget someone's behind them until that someone disappears. Everything shifted when Dr. Ellman retired last fall. He shook my hand on his last day and said, "Protect the bones of this place, Ava." 2 weeks later, Colton Myers arrived, tailored suit, sharp jaw, and a mission to modernize. First thing he did? Schedule an efficiency audit. He never once attended an IT debrief, never asked how our systems were structured. During meetings, he'd glance at his watch more than the slides. Then came Trey and his matching team of consultants, polo shirts, synchronized smiles, and a vocabulary of buzzwords. Digital transformation, cloud-first infrastructure, agile migration. I tried to explain. Briar Hill system wasn't plug and play. Our patient records interfaced with 19 different platforms, some commercial, some custom, many built specifically to bridge incompatible vendors. Trey barely blinked. "We've done dozens of these transitions. It's all standard stuff." But the red flags kept piling up. In the staff lounge, I found system flowcharts taped to the wall. Oversimplified diagrams that left out half the infrastructure. During one session, a junior consultant asked where the mainframe was. We haven't had one in 15 years. My emails? Polite replies. No follow-ups. And then one Friday, I found 2 contractors in my office, measuring the walls. "We're just planning renovations," one mumbled, eyes down. I went home that night and quietly updated my resume. Something in me knew. I'd seen enough code rot to recognize when leadership started treating people like outdated modules. But I still didn't believe they'd go through with it. I was wrong. They didn't just want change. They wanted erasure. The weekend after I was let go, the silence hit different. Number 2 AM alerts. No system pings. Just the hum of my old refrigerator and a dozen unopened job board tabs staring back at me. I picked at leftover low main while my phone vibrated off the coffee table. Alan from the IT team. "Hey Ava, what's the backup protocol for surgical scheduling again?" Denise, the database admin. "Can't locate the config file for the pharmacy interface. Any idea where it lives?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The termination agreement was airtight. No unauthorized assistance, no back-channel guidance. But with every message, the truth sank deeper. They weren't ready. The system they thought they could transition in 2 weeks wasn't a set of clean install files. It was a living, breathing organism, tied together by patches, protocols, and quiet miracles. I documented everything, of course. Hundreds of pages, stored safely in the encrypted archive. But documentation doesn't equate to comprehension. No bullet point could explain why the prescription refill queue occasionally needed a manual refresh after 18 hours. No network map would show the buried firewall exception, Doctor. Iron needed for the MRI scheduler. They'd removed the human thread holding all those systems together. And now they were tugging at wires, wondering why nothing lit up. My phone buzzed again. Colton, voicemail only. Ava, we're seeing some issues with the pharmacy integration. Mind giving me a quick call? I deleted it. 3 more messages came in by evening, each more urgent than the last. I didn't respond to any of them. I just sat there, staring at the hospital's name on my caller ID. And realizing, for the first time, they finally noticed I was gone. That Tuesday evening, my phone lit up again. But this time, it wasn't IT. It was Dr. Iyer calling from his personal number. Ava, did you hear what happened today? He asked, voice low. I hadn't. Trauma patient came in, critical. They couldn't pull her history from the system, pharmacy records, allergies, everything. Took nearly 40 minutes to get what they needed from the last hospital. I closed my eyes. No one was hurt, he added quickly. But it was too close. Colton's team is overwhelmed. They're even talking about rolling back to paper protocols, at least temporarily. I didn't say anything. Just let the silence fill the space between us. Because what was there to say? 15 years, I'd built systems that kept people alive. Quietly, consistently. The reward? Replacement. Now those same systems, taken for granted for so long, were finally showing what happened when the person behind them was removed. Not out of revenge, not out of pride, just out of absence. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen, hands wrapped around a cooling mug of coffee. I thought about the backup server hidden behind a maintenance panel, custom wired by me when no commercial solution would work. The fire safe in my office, where I stored hard copy overrides for emergencies. The authentication chain that would begin expiring in 12 days, if not renewed manually. It was never about one system. It was the whole web. And I had been the only one who knew where every thread led. Now they were unraveling, fast. The next morning, I poured myself another cup of coffee just as my inbox lit up like a fire alarm. 17 emails, all from Colton. Subject lines blurred together. Quick question, patient DB, urgent, cardiology system down, critical need, consult ASAP. I read each one, slowly, then deleted them. I wasn't being cruel. My severance agreement was crystal clear. No post-termination involvement. Still, I couldn't help but picture the chaos behind those messages. Cardiology frozen mid-diagnosis, insurance verification down, departments scrambling to rewrite workflows on the fly. That afternoon, my doorbell rang. I wasn't surprised. Colton stood there, shirt wrinkled, tie askew, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "Ava," he said with a forced smile. "Thanks for seeing me. Can we talk?" I stepped aside, offered coffee, waited. "We've hit a few complications," he began, gripping the mug too tightly. "Trey's team is working non-stop, but your system is, well, it's more complex than anticipated." I didn't answer, just let him unravel. "Billing's down. Oncology lost access to treatment plans for 6 hours yesterday. We're staring at compliance penalties and patient risk." He paused, then added quietly, "I'm prepared to offer you a 6-month contract. Double your previous salary. Just help us get through the transition." I studied his face. Desperation had replaced confidence. But the offer wasn't tempting. It was insulting. He hadn't come to respect my work. He'd come because his shortcuts failed. "I'm afraid I've already accepted another position," I said, setting my cup down. Colton froze mid-sip. Where? Riverside Medical. His jaw tightened. They're our competitor. I nodded. And they value experience. Colton set his mug down with a little too much force. Ava, be reasonable. You built these systems. You know how vital they are. This is about patient care. That line, delivered like a weapon, landed exactly where he aimed it. Because for 15 years, I had put patient care above everything. Above weekends, above holidays, above my own family. I agree, I said calmly. That's why I warned against rushing the migration. You'll find that email in the documentation you never read. His face flushed, but he wasn't done. The board wanted immediate progress. Modernization is necessary for long-term growth. I start at Riverside on Monday. Silence. Then, your severance includes a non-compete. You can't. I shook my head. No, it doesn't. I had my attorney review it. NDA, yes. Non-compete, no. I'm free to work where I choose. His mask cracked. This is about revenge, isn't it? Making us suffer because we let you go. I stood and walked to the door. This is about working somewhere that doesn't see dedication as a liability. He hesitated in the doorway, like he had more to say. But nothing came. I watched him walk to his car, defeated. Not because I'd won, but because he finally understood. This wasn't about disruption. It was about respect. And they hadn't just lost a technician. They'd lost the only person who knew what held their fragile system together. That night, my phone buzzed again. A text from Dr. Iyer. Admin in full panic. 3 departments down. Board emergency meeting called. I didn't respond, but I saved the message. Not as a trophy, as a reminder of what happens when experience is treated like clutter. By Thursday, the local news had picked up the story. I watched from my couch as a reporter stood outside Briar Hill's glass entrance, the same doors I'd walked through for 17 years. Sources confirm that several departments at Briar Hill General are operating under emergency paper protocols following a major IT failure, she said. Behind her, I could almost feel the tension pressing against the windows. That evening, my phone rang again. Jennifer Walsh, Director of Technology at Riverside. I saw the news, she said gently. You okay? I'm fine. Looking forward to starting Monday. There was a pause. Well, about that, she continued. I got a call from someone on Briar Hill's board, Dr. Celia Marrow. I blinked. Marrow was one of the few board members who actually understood what IT did. What did she want? To confirm you'd accepted our offer, Jennifer said, and to tell me something interesting about your exit. I sat up. She said Colton had been working with a firm called Helix Integrations for months before you were let go. He brought them in quietly, promised big cost savings if the hospital adopted their proprietary platform. I froze. Helix, I knew the name. They were known for offering cheap implementation up front and locking hospitals into expensive long-term contracts once their systems were embedded. Jennifer continued. Apparently, Colton would receive a personal bonus for meeting budget reduction goals. Your removal was part of clearing the path. So that was it. This wasn't modernization. It was a setup. I sat in stunned silence, Jennifer's voice still echoing in my ear. So Colton hadn't just misunderstood my role. He'd targeted it, deliberately cleared the path for Helix by labeling my systems obsolete. Systems that had kept Briar Hill running through cyber attacks, power outages, and policy changes no consultant ever stuck around long enough to understand. How bad is it really? I asked. Jennifer hesitated. Dr. Marrow says they've started diverting emergency cases to other hospitals. Critical care is on manual protocols, The State Compliance Office has launched an inquiry. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't just technical failure anymore. It was patient risk. People could get hurt. There's more, she added. Before proposing the Helix transition, Colton submitted a technology risk report. It claimed your infrastructure was outdated, non-compliant, and prone to failure. That's a lie, I said, the heat rising in my chest. We passed every audit, maintained over 99% uptime for years. I have the logs. I believe you, Jennifer said quietly. So does Dr. Marrow now. That's why she's asked the board to review the contract and your termination. After we hung up, I sat in the dim light of my living room, laptop humming quietly. Then I saw it. An email from Dr. Marrow, sent just an hour earlier. Subject: an invitation and an apology. Her words were clear. She acknowledged the board had been misled, that my systems had outperformed every benchmark, that the assessment had been manipulated. And she asked if I would come, to speak, not to fix anything, but to finally be heard. I arrived 15 minutes early, same as always. The boardroom looked different somehow, larger, colder. Maybe it was just the silence. Dr. Marrow greeted me with a quiet nod. Thank you for coming, Ava. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I said honestly. One by one, familiar faces entered. Department heads I'd worked with for years. Some offered cautious glances, others warm smiles. Then finally, Colton appeared, stopping short when he saw me seated at the table. Trey followed him, his confidence noticeably dimmed. Dr. Marrow called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss the ongoing system failures and reconsider our partnership with Helix Integrations. Ms. Langford has agreed to offer her perspective. Every eye turned to me. For 15 years, I'd been invisible by design. Now, the spotlight. I opened my laptop and spoke slowly. The infrastructure at Briar Hill wasn't outdated. It was tailored. Every integration, every interface, was designed around the real-world needs of this hospital. On the screen, I displayed the documentation they already had, but had never understood. Layered system maps, compatibility charts, risk flags, fail-safe protocols. The issue isn't a lack of documentation, I said. It's that Helix's platform was never built to work with systems like ours. Their model fits clean slates, not legacy environments with specialized clinical workflows. Colton interrupted, his voice tense. Helix has succeeded in dozens of hospitals. I clicked to the next slide. Yes, and every single one was a new build. The board leaned in. I continued, calm but unflinching. This wasn't modernization. It was misalignment, and it put patients at risk. They were no longer just listening. They were absorbing. I changed slides again. This, I said, highlighting a section in red, is from Helix's own technical specification. Note the incompatibilities with our pharmacy and radiology modules. I let the silence sit. Dr. Marrow turned toward Colton. Were you aware of these limitations when you recommended the platform? He hesitated. The assessment showed transition challenges would be minimal. I pulled up another document, an internal memo I'd received from a former colleague. Except this assessment, I said, was influenced. Staff were directed to emphasize vulnerabilities and downplay system reliability. Many of those metrics were selectively framed. The air grew still. Dr. Patel from cardiology leaned forward. We've diverted 67 emergency patients this week. 3 surgeries delayed. Medication errors up 12%. These aren't projections, Colton. They're facts. Colton stood flustered. You can't seriously consider abandoning modernization because of one disgruntled ex-employee's opinion. I'm not giving an opinion, I said evenly. I'm giving data and history. 20 minutes later, the board voted. Unanimously, the contract with Helix would be terminated. An emergency restoration plan would begin immediately, returning to the systems that had served them faithfully for years. As I packed up my laptop, Dr. Marrow approached again. "The board has a proposition, Ava," she said gently. I looked at her, measured, quiet. "I'm listening." 3 weeks later, I walked through Briar Hill's main entrance, not as a visitor, but as Chief Technology Officer, a new badge, a new title, but the same mission: protect what matters. The turnaround wasn't clean. The Helix team had rewritten core code, altered workflows, and corrupted several databases before pulling out. But my new team, a mix of trusted former colleagues and sharp new recruits, worked around the clock. We patched, rebuilt, recovered. And this time, we did it with a seat at the table. Colton was gone. "Pursuing other opportunities," the official email read. I hadn't asked for his removal. I didn't need to. The results spoke louder than revenge ever could. At the cardiology nurse's station, Camille spotted me and grinned. "Systems are running smoother than ever," she said, tapping her tablet. 2 seconds to pull a full patient record. Feels like magic. "Not magic," I replied with a soft smile. "Just people who give a damn." In the hallway, Dr. Patel joined me. "Heading to the quarterly review?" he asked. I nodded. "First one where you're at the table, instead of troubleshooting in the hallway with a laptop." We stepped into the boardroom. I connected my laptop to the projector, pulling up a new dashboard: uptime percentages, error logs, pre- and post-Helix comparisons. "Recovery is complete," I said. "No data lost. We've also implemented safeguards to prevent this kind of disruption from happening again." Dr. Marrow leaned forward. "And the future?" I changed the slide. A 5-year roadmap appeared. Careful, deliberate steps toward modernization. "No more disruption for the sake of appearances," I said. "Real progress builds on what works." And for the first time in 17 years, everyone in the room nodded. I was heading back to my office after the systems review when I heard footsteps behind me. "Miss Langford?" It was Eli, the new IT intern. Barely 20, bright-eyed, still getting lost in the submenus of our diagnostic tools. He jogged up beside me, slightly out of breath. "I hope this isn't weird," he said, nervously adjusting his badge. "But can I ask you something?" I stopped and nodded. "Back when everything was falling apart, before you came back, how did you stay so calm? I mean, people were panicking, but you didn't seem angry. Just steady." His voice was genuine, no flattery, just curiosity. I looked at him for a long moment, then pointed to a nearby bench by the hallway window. We sat. "You ever see a nurse in a trauma bay?" I asked. He nodded. "They don't scream, they don't flinch, even when the worst rolls through the door. Why? Because someone has to keep the line from snapping, even if their hands are shaking underneath." I paused. I wasn't calm because I wasn't hurt. I was calm because panic doesn't fix systems. Quiet focus does. Eli nodded slowly, taking it in. "I think I want to be like that," he said quietly. I smiled, not the polished one I gave in boardrooms, the real kind. "You will," I said. "Just remember, what looks like calm is often just experience, choosing where to place its weight." He stood, thanked me, and walked off, already typing notes into his phone. I watched him go, remembering a version of myself who once asked the very same thing. 6 months later, I sat on my back deck with a cup of coffee, the sun dipping low behind the trees. My phone buzzed. Jennifer Walsh from Riverside. Saw the news. Briar Hill won the Regional Excellence in Healthcare Technology Award. Congrats, almost colleague. I smiled. Thanks. Sorry for the sudden change in plans. No hard feelings, she replied. You ended up exactly where you needed to be. She was right. For 17 years, I kept this hospital running quietly in the background. No plaques, no headlines. Just long nights, backup scripts, and quiet victories no one noticed. Now, as CTO, I wasn't just behind the scenes. I had a seat at the table. Not for power, for protection of the systems, the people, the work that too many mistake as invisible. I scrolled through my phone, stopping at a photo from last week's staff appreciation dinner. My team, old friends and new hires, laughing around a table, a plaque in the center honoring our contribution to patient care. In my old role, no one had ever thanked me publicly. Now, people stopped me in the hallway, not to ask why the network was slow, but to say, I'm glad you're here. I glanced down at my badge on the table. Ava Langford, Chief Technology Officer, not just the one who kept the lights on, but the one helping shape the future. Not for recognition. For the truth. That experience matters. That care can't be outsourced. And that sometimes what they call outdated is what holds everything together.